Greetings from Kansas. It became the 34th state to join the Union on January 29, 1861. With 2.7 million residents, it ranks 33rd in population.
Of red and white checked tablecloths and picnics and hay and cattle and big sun and big skies, that is America. And it's a nice image to have.
When Dorothy was whisked away from her prairie homeland to the land of Oz, it was courtesy of a giant Kansas twister. Category 5 tornadoes are the most severe ever recorded, and Kansas gets more of them than almost anywhere else in the nation. The state's flat terrain and central location make a prime target. But Kansas weather isn't always stormy. An average year will see 226 sunny days, 10th most in the country. With all that sunshine, it's no wonder that a native flower gave Kansas its nickname, the Sunflower State. These plants, which have grown here for over 3,000 years, found their first commercial use in the 1920s as poultry feed. The state's signature crop, however, is wheat. In an average year, Kansas farmers produce enough to make over 26 billion loaves of bread, or about 4 loaves for every person on the planet. These prairie grasslands were once the home to the sole survivor of the Battle of Little Bighorn, who is now stuffed and on display in Lawrence, Kansas.
He ended up being a mascot in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
And Comanche lived a long, healthy life. After Comanche died, Comanche was stuffed and now is in the Deitch Museum on the University of Kansas.
It's hard to imagine that these quiet, small towns and wide-open plains were once a violent political battleground, which branded the territory as Bleeding Kansas. The issue that caused the upheaval? Slavery.
In the 1850s, Kansas News was the entire front page of all the New York and Boston papers almost every day.
In 1854, passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed the people in those two territories to decide on the question of slavery within their borders.
Kansas was settled by activists. The people who moved here came here to vote. No other state can say that.
One of those activists was a radical abolitionist whose actions would accelerate the momentum towards civil war. His name? John Brown.
People in the 19th century held very different racial beliefs than we do in the 21st century. Most 19th century Americans did not believe in the equality of blacks and whites. John Brown walked the walk and talked the talk. He believed in racial equality.
In May of 1856, Brown was motivated to act after the town of Lawrence was sacked by pro-slavery militia.
And as one of his sons remembered, he went crazy, in his words, and decided that he needed to take revenge on the pro-slavery side. He actually went to a place near his homestead on Pottawatomie Creek and dragged 5 pro-slavery settlers out of their homes in the middle of the night.
Brown and his party brutally killed their captives. He ultimately fled Kansas and went on to lead the failed slave revolt at Harper's Ferry in 1859, for which he was executed. But in Kansas, the conflict continued.
Kansas was certainly a spark of the Civil War. The creation of the Kansas Territory was an event that dominated America.
In 1861, Kansas was admitted to the Union as a free state. After the Civil War, the settlement of Kansas was spurred by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad that cut through the state. Towns sprang up along the rail lines as cowboys brought cattle up from Texas to be shipped to big cities by train.
Texans could easily have gone to New Orleans. Railroads were in New Orleans, but they risked life and limb going across 2,000-3,000 head at a time, Oklahoma, desert, drought, rattlesnakes, tornadoes, to get to Kansas so they could fatten the cattle before they put them on the railroads and sent them to Chicago.
As many as 8 million head a year boarded cattle cars in the place that came to be known as the Queen of the Cow Towns, notorious Dodge City.
Dodge City is a place a man could go to hide at one time, and that might still be true to some extent.
Back in the 1870s, Dodge City's most famous resident was Wyatt Earp, a man who had worked both sides of the law. Earp was hired to bring peace and order to this wide-open town.
He was an extremely good fighter. He was good with his fist. He was a prize fighter for a while. So there were many times that Wyatt Earp just hit a man and knocked him out and didn't have to shoot him.
Wyatt had his hands full. Dodge City wasn't just the world's largest cattle market, it was the wildest town on the frontier. Then in 1885, Kansas imposed quarantines on Texas longhorns to protect local herds from disease. That effectively ended the great era of cattle drives and cowboys. Dodge City's latest claim is that it's the windiest city in America, with an average wind speed of 13.9 miles per hour. The windy city of Chicago averages only 10.3. The Kansas winds once helped launch an entire industry, aviation.
Almost immediately after airplanes became a national curiosity, you have individuals throughout the state who are experimenting with some kind of flying machine.
Wealthy investors from the state's cattle, rail, and oil industries provided financial backing for several maverick aviators who turned a curiosity into a going concern. In 1911, Alvin K. Longren of Topeka built and flew the first plane in Kansas. That same year, Clyde Cessna moved to Wichita and learned about airplanes the hard way.
So he basically had to take that challenge on himself, which included, by the way, crashing 12 times and on more than one occasion banging himself up pretty severely until on the 13th flight he was able to take off and spend some time in the air and land.
Amelia Earhart, famed for setting women's speed and distance records, was an Atchison, Kansas native. By 1929, Wichita was America's air capital with 11 airports.
As being the center of not only B-29 Super Fortress production, but also lots of other aircraft, including the majority of the training aircraft, both for the Army and the Navy.
They built World War II bombers down there, B-29s. They build and fabricate parts of airframes for their current commercial airliners, and they're still in Wichita.
In 1962, Bill Lear could have picked anywhere in the world to build his Lear jets. He chose Wichita for the strength of the technical support the town's aircraft industry could supply. Today, Salina maintains 2 runways long enough to recover the space shuttle in the event of an emergency. NASA's decision to incorporate Kansas in their space program is not altogether surprising. The state motto is Ad Astra per Aspera, to the stars through difficulty.
The beauty of the prairie is really something that few people appreciate. A lot of Easterners can come out and see flat land and describe it as 10,000 acres of nothing. In fact, if you stay with it, I think you can feel the pulse of the earth under your feet. My roots run deep in Kansas.
Look here, I'm talking about America, sweet America.